Welcome back to episode 8 of the Toe Picks Happen podcast with Coach Ashley. I am your host, Ashley, and today we're going to be talking about the 9 lessons that I learned in 2024. Before we get started, I just want to give you a little heads up. You might hear some noises in the background. If you do, I apologize, but I'm having some work done in my bathroom, so it's a little noisy, but I tried to find a quiet place to record this because I did want to get this episode out there before we get further into January 2025. I think that it's important that I share some of the things that I learned last year because I think that a lot of you listening to this are probably going through some similar things and these takeaways might be helpful for you. First off, I'd say my biggest takeaway, which kind of is like the umbrella over the 9 lessons that I learned, is how important mindset is. I personally went through some ups and downs. Like I had a lot of peaks and valleys in my personal life last year with my family and then other relationships. And if I hadn't been working on my mindset years prior and also throughout last year would have been even more difficult for me to get through and to try to navigate some of those valleys. But it also made me appreciate when I had really high peaks in my year. And I did have a lot of bright spots. If you've been following me on Instagram, you probably saw my reel where I did a recap of 2024. And I usually don't do things like that for a couple of reasons. But the main one is that I think that we all know that social media shows like a highlight reel. And it's really easy to pick through our camera roll and find videos and pictures that show how great everything is. And when we do these like end of year recaps, obviously nobody wants to see like really depressing moments or times where things weren't good. Like nobody usually pulls out their phone and they're showing like the worst parts of their day or the worst parts of a month or whatever. So we don't usually have those types of things when it comes to making these recaps and making these reels or posts on social media, but they do happen. And as I was going back through my camera roll from 2024 to make that recap reel, I realized like as many great things that happened last year, I had maybe two or three things that were valleys for me. So I would have a peak and then I would have a couple valleys that would take me down and bring my frequency down, bring my energy down, make me feel really sad or upset. And then I would have these little moments here and there that would kind of lift me up again and I'd be able to carry them through. And then I would have something else happen. So what happened isn't really like the important part. It's more just how I was feeling. That's kind of how I gauge how important my mindset was for me last year and kind of like the point of view from where I'm coming from on the lessons that I'm going to talk about with you. Because how I'm feeling, even if things aren't like horrible, like nothing horrible has happened that I can't come back from or anything like that, but it's how I feel. So I think that if we find a way to be able to tap more into like how we can feel better when we're feeling low or how we're feeling high, when we're feeling higher, to be able to carry that good energy with us for a long period of time will help us get through those times where they're more like valleys or low points. That's like a huge thing that I learned last year. And that all goes in with mindset. I think the other thing that's important too is how in skating, this last year, obviously I was like all into skating. I skated pretty much every day. Either I was doing private lessons, I was doing group classes, I was doing team skating, I was skating for myself. We always say that skating is probably, if I had to give it a number, like 80% mindset and mental, 20% physical. So yes, you have to be physically capable of skating. You have to have some sort of balance. You have to be able to hold up your body weight on your skates. You have to be able to have some good range of motion. But even if you have all those things, if you don't believe that you can do it, you won't be able to skate. And some of the lessons that I learned have a lot to do with stemming from what happened at the rink in my life and then also some personal stuff too. Now, before I get deep into the 9 lessons that I learned in 2024, I do want to let you guys know that coming up at the end of the month, I have something special that I am so excited to share with you all, and I'm going to be releasing that information shortly. So make sure that you're following me on Instagram and subscribing here on YouTube at AKC Style. I'll make sure that the links are down in the description box. You can also go to my website, akcstyle.com, and make sure that you're on my wait list so that you will be the first to know when I'm dropping this new exciting offer for you guys. I'm really excited to share it, and if you've been following me already, you probably have seen some things about it, so you might have some insight. But I want to make sure that you all know about it since you're here listening with me now and you're following me already. I want to make sure that you guys know about everything first. So I'll drop all of the links down in the description box. Okay, let's get into my 9 lessons. Number 1 is that my self-belief is stronger than any external criticism. I think we all have an inner voice, no matter how confident you are or how much self-esteem you have. We all have an inner voice that kind of criticizes everything we do, that judges us. And sometimes that voice feels like it's trying to protect us from doing something that will make us look foolish or make us look strange to other people. But we also have an external voice or segment of our life that criticizes us. Sometimes that's people from our family, sometimes that's our friendships or people who aren't necessarily like our inner circle, but they're, on our peripheral of our friendship groups, or people that we work with, our coworkers, classmates. It could be anybody, your neighbors, your family, friends. So like your inner voice is often dictated by your external criticisms or your external voices that pass judgment on you and everything that you do. So yes, you have this internal voice because it's coming from you, but it's really informed by a lot of outside voices more than it is coming from yourself. So, last year I made a lot of changes in my business and in my, just how I live my life pretty much. And my self-belief, knowing that I was making the right decision, outweighed any criticisms that I had from other people. Now, that doesn't mean that outside criticisms or external criticisms didn't ever penetrate my mindset, because that's definitely not true. We're humans. Like, it's impossible to totally remove criticisms that affect you negatively from your psyche. But I knew, regardless of what anybody thought or said, that I believed in myself. There's a reason why I'm feeling called and compelled to do these things, and I need to just follow through. So that was one of the things that helped me get through some of those valleys that I was feeling, and helped me move on to a peak as well. So one of the things that I really believed in was that I can become a figure skating coach and have this passion that I have for skating and this ability that I have to teach people how to skate and how to learn how to skate could be a business. And it's something that I've been working on for the last couple of years, but I really was letting outside criticism dictate if that was possible and if it's even something that I should shoot for. I think that people have in their mind this thought that you can only be a coach as like a job or turn it into a business if you're training like national level or Olympic level skaters. But like, we all know that a very, very small percentage of figure skaters in all disciplines, and even just generally elite athletes, there's a very small percentage of that number of people who are looking for coaches, who are looking for training, and the world for that like elite level training is so tiny. And it's the same people who coach this small group of athletes. But we do know that, you and I, we're just regular people who love to figure skate or who love any type of sport that you're in now. Why do you deserve less training or less passion from your coaches than somebody who's trying to reach an Olympic level? Like, when you think about it that way, it doesn't make any sense. So you don't have to listen to people who don't understand where you're coming from and that external criticism to not believe that you can go ahead and move forward with coaching for people who just want to learn. There's no reason why you can't coach them, and there's no reason why you're not good enough to do that. So that was kind of like my thought process with that. So that's my first lesson from last year. Lesson number 2 is that recovering from an injury is more mental than physical. Now, if you've ever had any type of broken bone or a fracture or sprain or anything like that, or like a head injury or anything that just kind of like took you out, even if it was a simple like slip and fall and you didn't actually seriously injure yourself, but it's just that mental thing of being like, okay, I remember that spot on the ice I fell, or I remember that's the place where I tripped, or I stepped on the ice without with my guards on and I slipped and hurt myself. Like, even if it's not a broken bone or super severe and a head injury or anything like that, you do know that mentally you think about it every time you get on the ice. So even after you heal, even after your scars heal and you may not even see a scar anymore, or your bone has, been mended, maybe you had surgery, maybe you were in a cast, you still think about it, and it is something that you can mentally think about long after your physical scars or wounds have healed. And I think that the recovery process, when you're just like in your doctor's office, or maybe you're going through physical therapy now, or back then if you were injured a while ago, that's just one part of the process. And I think that we need to understand that this process may take longer than 6 to 8 weeks. It might take longer than 6 months after you've physically healed to recover from having an injury. I have myself had more than a few concussions, at least 3 that were diagnosed concussions over the course of my skating career, especially when I was competing and started working on double jumps and things, and I was just skating way more. And I know that at the time, it was many years ago, so the way that we talk about the concussion protocol and things like that now, that wasn't something that was even implemented back when I was competing still. So if you had a concussion, it was like, all right, can you see how many fingers am I holding up? What's your name? What's your birthday? What's today's date? Who's the president? Like, those were the questions that first were asked to you. And then it was like, go to the doctor and make sure you're okay. And the doctor really couldn't do anything for you, kind of like shine a light in your eyes, see how you're feeling, give you medicine if you're feeling like you have a headache, tell you not to go to sleep, and then you get up the next day and go to school. So like when I had my concussions, it wasn't a thing that's talked about now. Like if those head injuries had happened to me now, it would be totally different. I probably would have only had 1 concussion instead of multiple. There were at least 5 really bad falls where I don't remember 2 out of the 5. I don't remember even how I got up off the ice. So I definitely hit my head. But it wasn't really discussed what happens next. I remember taking a day off of school during those 2 times for 1 day, and then 2 days after I had hit my head, I went back to school. And my teachers didn't know what happened. My mom monitored me, but the things that we do now for people who have concussion, and you're monitoring it for 72 hours and you're just making sure that you're not getting nauseous, that, your pupils look like normal, your headaches, you're monitoring them, making sure that they don't get more severe, that you're physically okay, and you don't have any problems with your neck or your spine or anything like that. That's the type of stuff that we look at now. But back then, we weren't paying attention to any of that. And mentally, that still sticks with me now, which is why my axle was a jump that I was afraid to try again. I'm happy now that last year I was able to attempt it. And yeah, it was cheated a little bit, but I was so afraid to attempt that jump because on multiple of those 5 occasions where I had really, really bad falls, I was attempting my axle. So, I just had this mental block where if I try it, I'm going to hurt myself. If I tried, I'm going to hurt myself. If I tried, I'm going to hurt myself. So that would just always come up for me, even if I felt like, okay, I'm physically capable, I'm able to do this, I tried my double loop, I can do this. Like, my double loop is more difficult than my axel. Why can't I try my axel? But it's that mental bit of recovery that I never got, because I just didn't know. And now as an adult and as a coach, I'm able to look back at that time and say, okay, that was the missing part of my healing. I didn't really fully understand what I needed to do to get over those injuries back then. So now as a coach, my skaters who have had injuries, I try to really check in on them to make sure that they are comfortable, not just getting back on the ice, but just generally. Like, how do you feel as you're moving through your day? You know, when you're on the ice with me, we might only be together for maybe 1 to 2 hours, if that, maybe even a little less sometimes. So I may not be able to see how you're functioning and making sure you're okay after your injury of any sort. But you know how you feel, and you know how people interact with you throughout your day, just normally. So how you function off the ice is just as important in your recovery when you're having an injury as how you function when you're on the ice. Lesson number 3, looking back at the past is important, but don't let yourself get stuck looking back. I think this kind of relates to lesson 2 about recovering and thinking about your past as well. I did a lot of reflection last year, which is why I can sit back and think about like injuries that I had and how things were handled and just different things like that. But I can't get stuck in thinking about what could have been or how things could have been different, because if you do that, and I can say this personally, if I were to get stuck in the way that things used to be, I would not be able to plan for the future, set goals for myself for the future. I wouldn't be able to think about how things could be better, especially when I was in those kind of valleys or those low points last year. If I got stuck in how I could change things or how I could have changed things in the past, instead of, okay, I could have done this. Now here's where I could change it, or I might feel a little bit of regret, but it happened. I need to move past it. And instead of being filled with regret, I just know I won't do that again. I know that going forward, I can do XYZ thing better. And that's it. Then I release the thought and move forward. There's a big difference between getting stuck in the past and self-reflection. Self-reflection is like kind of recalling what happened, realizing how you could change things or make it better, and then making sure that going forward, you don't repeat the same pattern. When you get stuck, you overanalyze and overthink every little action that you took in a situation that you might feel a little regretful about. That's how you get stuck. If you start overthinking and overanalyzing, you will get stuck in the past and you will not be able to see yourself moving forward. You'll have a really, really hard time if you keep trying to go back and recount situations where you feel like, maybe you could have said the right thing. What was the right thing? Maybe if I did just this thing, this would have changed that person's mind, or this action would have been different. That to me is not self-reflection. That to me is overthinking and getting stuck in your own head. Lesson number 4, I believe in setting goals, but flexibility is way more important. If you have been following me or you're subscribed here, you know that I talk a lot about goal setting, and there's all sorts of different ways that you can goal set depending on what your goal is, and if you're looking at the whole year ahead, or you're looking for a month ahead, or you have like a big goal that you just want to achieve and you don't even have a timeline. There's all sorts of different ways that you can set goals, and I don't personally think that there's one right way. You have to try different things and then find what works for you. Some people don't even set goals, which personally, that would drive me crazy, but it's nice to have a target. But I also kind of envy people who don't need to set a goal to achieve things, because there is so much opportunity in doing that. You just kind of are able to decide you want to do something and then you go for it. You don't need to like sit down and do this whole goal setting process. But for me personally, I do enjoy doing the goal setting process, so that's why I do it. I set my goals quarterly, and then I take time to look at each of them per month. So I just have like a big overview for what I want to do for the year. And then throughout the year, I just move through and say like, okay, I achieved this, I achieved that, or I haven't done that. Did I really even work towards making that goal? Okay, maybe I need to change things, and maybe the goal needs to change. Maybe how I'm moving towards that goal needs to change. So that process for me helps me to be able to reflect, but it also makes me feel like, okay, I've done more than I thought I did. That usually is what happens when I sit down and set goals like at the beginning of the quarter. So if you've never done this before, I'll just give you a brief overview. Quarterly goal planning is thinking like in chunks of time. So how I plan it is through 3-month blocks. So I do January, February, March. That's my first quarter. And then April, May, June is my second quarter, and so on and so forth. So you can do that however you want to. If you're thinking about it for like your skating season, if you start skating in September, then maybe September, October, November, that's your first chunk or your first block of goal setting. And then December, January, February is your next chunk or your next block of goal setting. And then so on and so forth. But it's really up to you. There's no right way to set goals. That's up to you. Which is also why I think it's so important to be flexible about your goals. If you set a goal for yourself in December and now it's January and you haven't made steps towards that goal, instead of beating yourself up over it, you can just sit back and think like, maybe that goal was too big for me to accomplish for January. Or maybe like, I'm still halfway through the month. I still have half the month left to go. There's a possibility that I can still meet that goal. So what do I have to do to change where I'm at now to make sure that that goal happens at the end of January? There's so many different ways you can look at it. So instead of beating yourself up, you should be more flexible about how you approach your goals. Lesson number 5, you've got to have faith that people can change. Even you can change. I think that last year I personally spent a lot of time hoping that I could change people's minds about things and thinking like, oh, maybe just like with a little bit of time, they'll change what they think, or maybe they'll see my perspective of things. And then when they didn't, this happened especially towards the beginning of the year, or the first half of the year, when they didn't change, I started to think like, okay, well, that's what people just don't change. Like they just don't change. And, the way that they start is the way that they end, and that's it. Which is a super pessimistic way to think about people. I think instead, what I started to learn towards the second half of the year with just some more reflection and some time away from some of that negative thinking was how like people can change, but they're not going to change through your timeline. So instead of thinking that people aren't able to ever change and that this is just the way they are forever, it's just the way that they are now, but they might change. Like that is a possibility, but it's just not going to be in my timeline. So, when I started to think of things like that, I started to realize like, well, okay, if I'm growing in my mindset and I'm growing in how I feel about myself, I feel like I'm maturing, I can see the difference between me and, some of the people that I had in my life last year, and they're not doing those things, or maybe they're doing them differently than me. So I see more growth in myself than I see in them. That doesn't mean that they're bad or that they're doing anything wrong, or it doesn't mean that I'm doing anything better or I'm good and they're not, or anything like that. It just means that our evolution and changing is at different timelines. It's at different periods. And instead of being pessimistic that like I'm growing and they're not, or I'm, becoming more mature and they're staying the same, as like a negative, could be like, well, I'm changing just on a different timeline as them. And that's not anything bad. That doesn't mean that I need to cut this person out. That doesn't mean that they're bad people or anything like that. It just means that their change is different than mine and the timeline is different. So instead of just totally cutting people off or being negative about the way that those people are moving through their lives, I can say, you know, I have faith that they're going to change. So I can hold space for that while continuing to do my own thing. There's nothing wrong with that. Lesson number 6. Your breakthrough is on the other side of your lowest point. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, last year brought me a lot of peaks and probably more than enough valleys to fill a whole year. I had quite a few low points, but towards the middle of 2024, I was going back and forth with one of my mentors, and I was kind of explaining to her like how I was feeling and where I was at. And she said something that was like so profound to me because it just didn't occur to me. I was feeling like I'm so low right now. I feel a little isolated. I feel like maybe this is what depression feels like. I don't know. I just was not feeling like myself at all. And some of the things that I had shared with her were making me feel like I was stretching myself, but it didn't feel good. And I always thought that like if I stretch myself past, you know, my limitation, then that would mean that like, oh, that's a good thing. Like I'm feeling really happy about that. I'm glad that I pushed myself. Like that's always where I had come from. So I had never really experienced what it feels like to push your limits and feel negative about it, like feel bad about it. So the thing that she said to me that was pretty profound was she's like, I feel like it sounds to me like you're having a breakthrough. And I sat back for a minute and just kind of like stared into space. Like my soul left my body when she said it. I was like, huh? But like a breakthrough is supposed to be good. Like, so when she said that to me, I just kind of was like confused and also felt like so insecure in that moment, thinking like it never occurred to me that having a breakthrough would have a negative feeling. But when I sat back and really thought about it and we had this discussion, it made me realize that she's right. I was feeling the way I was feeling, not because it was necessarily bad or I was like in a low place. I'm never going to be able to get out of this low place. It is a breakthrough. It was like an epiphany, an aha moment, like the light bulb went off over my head. I was like, oh, wait. So on the other side of this low point, I can see a bright spot. I can see what's on the other side of this. That's what a breakthrough is. It's like, you know, the analogy that I see when I think about this moment that happened to me between me and my mentor is, you know, walking down a dark road and you see that there's a tunnel ahead. So you can decide that you don't want to go through the tunnel because it looks pretty dark, and you can see that it's really long on the other, like through this tunnel, but you know that really, really, really far away that there is another side of the tunnel because you can see a little light. Like you can see the little light at the end of the tunnel, and you know if you go through that dark tunnel, it's going to probably be scary. It's super dark because that's all you can see. But you know that there is light coming from somewhere. So the tunnel doesn't just have a block and it doesn't just like end abruptly. You can see that there is something on the other side of it. So when we were having this back and forth, we were having this discussion, that's the analogy that popped up in my head is going through the tunnel. So I could either stay where I'm at now because I know what's around me, there's safety around me, but it's making me feel uncomfortable to stay where I'm at. Like I know that everything in my body and my mind is telling me to go through the tunnel. So if I just go, it's going to be scary because I don't know what's going to happen. But I can see that there's a light. So if I just keep walking towards the light, I know that it's going to be good on the other side. And even if it's not perfect, it's going to be better than staying where I'm at feeling uncomfortable, because feeling where I'm at doesn't feel good. So then the only way for me to move is forward. And that's kind of what came up for me when I thought about like reflecting from last year. I did have a breakthrough the second half of the year, which is why I'm able to sit here and have this kind of recap with you for all the lessons that I learned. If I hadn't have gone through the tunnel to see the bright point, I wouldn't be sitting here right now talking to you about this. If you're still here, thank you so much for continuing to listen. I still have 3 more lessons that I want to share with you all, but I also want to remind you again to check the links in my description box so that you can make sure that you know everything that's coming in 2025, all the great things that I have to share ahead. I don't want you to miss out on them, and I want to make sure that you get on my wait list. So make sure you check out the links in my description box and make sure you don't miss out on anything coming up, which I have some very exciting things that I'll be sharing with you in the next couple weeks. Number 7, the end of something doesn't mean anything other than the fact that you're ready for a fresh start. So when something ends, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to feel like you're in a low or you're in a valley, but it doesn't mean that you'll be that way forever. It just means that you have a new opportunity to start something fresh. You have an opportunity to hit the reset button and completely restart how you feel about yourself, reset your energy, try to tap into a new frequency in your mindset, and restart. One of the things that we always talk about is how to reframe your mindset. And I don't think that you can reframe your mindset if you think that every time something is over, that it equals negativity or something bad happening. It just means instead you need to reframe your mindset to think about it as a fresh start. I think as we start 2025, that's something that's definitely been top of mind for me for a lot of reasons. I think that the election was a huge shift for me. And for a while, I was in a very low place. I think most of us were. If you're listening to this, you probably understand what I'm feeling, and how that kind of changed what you may have thought would happen in 2025 for you. I know it did for me. But instead of thinking, this is the end and it's all downhill from here, which we don't know what this time period will bring for us, but I do know that it instead motivated me to plan more for my future, and it motivated me to really look ahead and think, what do I want my life to look like? What do I want my life to be? And instead of feeling like this is over, I'm in a low place and 2025 will be crap, instead I thought, okay, 2025 is unpredictable. And I can either look at it and say it's over, or say like, nope, this is now where I hit the gas and all the things that I want for my life are possible, but I need to really, really, really push myself to make them happen in a way that I hadn't before. Maybe I was getting a little too comfortable. Maybe I was a little too complacent. So how can I get out of that energy and shift it? So yeah, number 7 is the end of something doesn't mean anything other than you're ready for a fresh start. Number 8, give yourself time for rest, relaxation, and to be in recovery energy. So this looks different for so many people. Recovery energy for some people means, being more productive. If you've come out of a space where you're feeling like you've been a little bit stagnant, or you let deadlines pass and things are overdue, and maybe you've been procrastinating too much, recovery energy for you might be, getting organized. It might look like just making sure that you know when things are due, and you have a planner and you have dates that you're keeping your eye on. Maybe for you, recovery energy looks like instead, you've been really tight with your timelines. You've been in an energy where like you've been go, 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 and everything is really tight. You have no space in your calendar. You have no space in your day to do the things you actually want to do. You're obligated towards other people. So maybe for you, recovery energy looks more like taking space in your calendar, to read a book. Maybe it means setting aside 25 minutes to 30 minutes in a single week to sit down and see how far you can get in that book that your friend recommended you. It could be as something as small as that. But if you give yourself that space every week over the course of a month, you could probably get at least halfway through your book, maybe even further, depending on how long the book is and how fast of a reader you are. But now you've given yourself that space. So then maybe the next month you continue giving yourself that space, but then you add in an hour where you can just watch like a junky reality show. For me, that's like watching The Real Housewives. I love The Real Housewives. I don't care what anybody says, but I will always make time in my schedule to watch The Housewives. But that time for me is less about zoning out on, a reality show and more about taking time to like sit and be entertained. So like you have to make time in your schedule to be entertained. You have to make time in your schedule to spend time with your friends, enjoy your family, be with yourself even. Take yourself out on a date. Go out to the movies by yourself. Go to a restaurant by yourself. Go grab a slice of pizza and like scroll on social media by yourself. Like you can do those things. You have to make time for them. I wish that I had made time for myself to have more fun in 2024. So that's one of the things that I want to make time for in 2025. I really didn't spend any time with my friends. I spent more time focused on business and serious things last year than I did on fun. And I want to really make more time in my calendar for fun this year. And that sounds like so unfun. It sounds very unexciting. But because last year I was so focused, I didn't make time in my calendar to socialize or to date. I didn't make time for that. I want to make time for that for myself in 2025 for no other reason except that I know I need it. I know personally that I thrive off of laughing and enjoying myself and being entertained and going on vacation. Like those types of things are important for me. So if I don't make time for them, I'm saying that I'm not important. I'm saying that everything and everybody around me is more important than the things that I know that make me feel joy or make me feel fulfilled. So I need to give myself more time to rest, relax, and be in that energy of recovery, and you should do the same. The last lesson from 2024 that I want to share with you all is how important your frequency is. Your frequency is everything. Now, on another episode, we can go really deep into what frequency is, what it looks like personally, but I've talked a little bit about it with the other 8 lessons that I've learned. But your frequency is basically like the energy that you emit and the energy where you're at, pretty much. So it's like when you wake up in the morning, you can be in a low frequency where you're like, I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to go to work. I don't want to go to school. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to do anything. Or you can be at a high frequency and be so excited, throw the covers back, jump out of bed, and then like run outside and like feel the fresh air and hear the birds sing. Like you can be in that super high energy or high frequency. Or you can be in like a very calm and peaceful and like wise energy where you're excited to get up and start your day because you know you have some exciting things going on. Maybe you have exciting projects that you're working on. Maybe you have something that's really fun that you're going to do that day, or you're going to see somebody you haven't seen in a long time, and you're just in a very like calming and peaceful frequency. There's so many different ways you could be. But I think for me last year, I was in a frequency where I felt like I was up and down and all around. I wasn't in any type of calm energy. I wasn't in a super high frequency. I wasn't in a super low frequency. I had moments where I was up and I had moments where I was down, and I just didn't feel like stable or comfortable throughout the whole year, like consistently. So I personally would like to get into a frequency this year where I feel more stable with how I'm moving through my day, what my weeks look like. I don't want to feel overwhelmed. I don't want to feel like I'm not doing enough and I'm not productive. but I think understanding like that happy medium helps you tap into a frequency that makes you feel good. So whatever that looks like for you, I think you need to find it and understand kind of like in a week. And I use a week a lot as like a time frame, because I think that gives you a good gauge of like where you should be generally speaking for the year or for the month. Sometimes if you look at where you want to be at for a month, it's a little bit too broad and it's easy to get overwhelmed or to feel like you're not doing enough. So if you look at it in a week's time frame, so you can do like Sunday to Saturday is how I look at my week. What are the things that you did in that week that made you feel good? What are the things in that week that made you feel stressed or overwhelmed? And who were the people you interacted with that contributed to either that stress and overwhelm feeling or that really happy energy? And then that's a good way to say like, okay, what kind of frequency was I in this week? Was I in the high frequency? Was I in a low frequency? And what can I do the following week to feel more comfortable and find a good place where I feel safe, comfortable, and calm? I don't feel overwhelmed. I don't feel super hyped or super low. So I think that that's something that we can talk about in another episode. But your frequency and your energy is everything. That's the biggest takeaway, besides like how important your mindset is, because they coincide. They're one and the same to me, frequency and mindset. So those are my 9 lessons that I learned in 2024. I hope that some of them resonated with you and you can take this away. Thank you so much for listening through. This was a little bit longer of a podcast episode than I normally do, but I do think it was important for me to share where I'm coming from now, and I hope to see you in the next one. Make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss out on a new episode, and I'll see you on Instagram, YouTube, and on my waitlist. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for listening today. If you found this episode helpful, let me know in the comments, and be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. This helps other figure skaters discover my channel and also helps me decide what topics I should share with you next. Have fun out there, and I'll see you at the rink.